არა უშავს კაცო დღეს უცოტა ადრე ვარ მაინც დასასვლელი და არ მიყვარს ხოლმე მაგრამ რაღაც რო არ გამოგეჭყიროს არ შეიძლება
მე დასასვლელი ვარ მე ვახო უნდა დაამთავროს ერთი აქ მაქვს ერთი ღონისძიება აქ და მეორე აქ კიდევ უფრო მაგარი რა საბიცარი
მე მაქვს ეგრე 28-29 ჩამოკიდებული ვარ სახრჩობელაზე წესით 3 ადგილას უნდა ვიყო ერთდროულად მაგრამ ორგან თუ მოვახერხე ეგეც დიდი ამბავია ჩაწეული ხონდა
მე ჩაუწია რაღაცას დიდ ხრიალებდა
მოგესალმებით ITU-ს მინდა დიდი მადლობა გადავუხადო რომ მომანდო მოდერატორობა ამ სხდომისა ჩვენ ვისაუბრებთ სწორედ იმ აღმოჩენებს რომლებიც ასე ვთქვათ დღეისათვის ვაპირებთ ჩვენ ვისაუბროთ იმ ახალი ასე ვთქვათ აღმოჩენების თაობაზე რომელიც ახლად გამოცემულ ანგარიშში არის გამოცემული MIS 2010 წელს დაარსდა და მას შემდეგ ის ცდილობს რომ შეისწავლოს ყველა ის იარაღი რომლის მეშვეობითაც შესაძლებელია მონიტორინგი ICT ასე ვთქვათ განვითარების სიახლეებისა და პირველივე ასე ვთქვათ გამოცემათა შევძლოთ ჩვენ შევაფასოთ ის ასე ვთქვათ ზეგავლენა რომელიც ჩვენმა ძალისხმევამ გამოიწვია ამ ანგარიშში მოცემულია თანამედროვე ტენდენციები ICT განვითარებისა და მრავალი ახალი ინდიკატორი არის ასე ვთქვათ დადგენილი რომელიც
chisel holding right hand at the Svetikoveli Basilka in Cheta. And this reflects the tetralemma of showing or talking truth to power. At times when you do so, they don't like it. Throughout life, not once has the tetralemma of statistics, communication technology, and power threatened the foundations of one of measurement, namely collecting the facts about phenomena and reporting on such observations through the lens of numbers. I feel the welcoming warmth of the city of Tbilisi as if the legendary King Vatang I Jogal Sali has delegated his son King Dachi I Ujameli to receive me in this city, drumming with history and influence since time immemorial. Kintama, or Quintama, Kintama, stands as the symbol of how deep gender equality was understood in Georgia, and gender activists owe a priceless debt to King George and his daughter, King Quintama, as founders of gender equality. They are worth canonizing for their far-sighted leadership in driving the gender-sensitized meritocracy agenda. One other monarch to recognize this is King Mushashwe, the founder of the Basotho nation. If he had his way, his daughter Senati would have been king, but his desires could not pass the Patriarchal Advisory Council. The path to social, economic, and political justice is paved with many such obstructive advisory types of council. Even the legacy of King George of gender equality could not be sustained. These obstructions frame my response to this report on measuring the Information Society 2014. I have thus framed my response as the tetralemma of statistics, communications, technology, and power, challenges of the post-2015 agenda. It even gives me greater pleasure to address an organization that is almost 150 years old. The ITU itself having been established in 1865. Its Siamese twin, the International Statistics Institute, ISI, to which I belong, had a delayed birth. Born 20 years later in 1885, it has, however, proven to mature much faster, with 59 world congresses under its belt since its birth, compared to 12 of WTIS. Very few associations have had the resilience to survive this long as they speak and communicate truth to power. My rendition is about the tetralemma of the triumvirate of statistics, communication, technology, and power. I framed the tetralemma through the metaphor of the sculpture of Asukit's chisel-holding hand engraved at the Sveteskoveli Basilica in Cheta. Legend has it that Asukit's scientific architectural designs at Sveteskoveli Basilica in Cheta won him wrath at the highest level. It cost him his right hand. The sculpture of his chisel-holding hand is a reminder of how his unprecedented and artistic and scientific architectural design and construction is said to have challenged the power of his patron and teacher, who influenced King George to have his right hand chopped off. The external northern wall has an inscription that reads, "The hand of Asukit, slave of God, may forgiveness be his." To the east, another inscription reads, "May forgiveness be his." To the east, another inscription reads, "This holy church was built by the hand of thy wretched servant, Asukit. May your soul rest in peace, O Master." Galileo Galilei, in his grave, knows the consequences of speaking truth to power. It cost him his life. The dynamic and consequences of results of scientific inquiry, the communication thereof to power, the appropriation and deployment by communities of practice reflect the struggle of society as it changes its production relations, the structure of its productive forces, and how it gives rise to a new socio-economic and political form. The tetralemma of statistics, communication, technology, and power is brought about by the irresistible affinity of living organisms to be prey to conflict of interest. Napoleon Bonaparte was said to be a keen user of statistics as a management tool. Laplace, the prime mover of Bayesian theory, lived in Napoleon's palace. But then Napoleon used statistics by and large as an exclusive weapon for leadership rather than a public good. The dilemma then was whether the plebiscite had a say in their own affairs or they relied and depended on benevolent dictatorship. Napoleon, through the revolution, introduced a more warrior-like France and led to French demise, spurred by the failed invasion of Russia. However, on the positive side, Napoleon managed to abolish serfdom and slavery and introduce the metric system that has made our measurement so efficient today. The height of the crisis of the tetralemma of statistics, communications, technology, and power displays itself in the 20th and 21st century through the crash of the stock exchange and war. The two world wars and the Cold War just marked the extent to which, temporally and spatially, statistics, information technology, resource and power asymmetries are capable of plunging the world into a crisis. The dot-com bubble was just a feature of how communications technology generated an exaggerated view of itself, an aspect of the tetralemma. The more recent 2008 financial crisis that led to the economy of the world to an abyss just demonstrated how vulnerable the interconnected world can be, and that the obfuscation of statistics driven by corporate greed, largely in the United States and Europe, collapsed the world. The lack of harmony in statistics, communication technology, and power in the modern world is what undermines an information society. The so-called Arab Spring was characterized by heightened disjuncture and tetralemma across the centrifugal forces of statistics, information technology, and power. The Measuring the Information Society report by itself mirrors these social struggles and gives a spatial and temporal narrative of their theatrics. The report problematizes the characteristics of an information society by providing the schematic contours country by country and region by region. In its detail, the report subtly frames the fundamental postulate of the emergent and yet metamorphosing political economy of an information society. It silently poses profound questions of why societies and communities differ in value creation and value appropriation of information technology. It presents vital statistics of who are going to be heirs to information technology, as well as who are emerging as harmonious information societies, and by the same token, reflects the flip side of who are representing a deformed strata of information society. It lays bare the facts about uneven development and podcasts this phenomena unambiguously to power and for power to know. It thus brings out the skeleton of this tetralemma of statistics, communication, technology, and power out of its comfortable place. The report causes society to engage in uncomfortable and disruptive discussions and questioning. This is so especially in the light of socially desirable utopia promise propounded by the Secretary General of the United Nations of leaving no one behind, putting sustainable development at the core, growing economies for jobs, and creating just and accountable societies. These desirable states, espoused by the Secretary General of the United Nations of the post-2015 agenda, drives the tetralem of statistics, communications, technology, and power, for which the report is the gunpowder. The report propels data revolution to take center stage of an information society. The report points to Denmark as a country that has appropriated the virtues of information and communications technology the most. In fact, 6 Scandinavian countries feature in the top 10 on IDI use. This prominent Scandinavian record, however, compares less favorably when we consider ICT Development Index, Skills Sub-Index, where only 2 of the Scandinavian countries feature in the top 10, and Denmark coming in at position 12. In this regard, the report points to Greece in the first slot of Skills Sub-Index. It is difficult to absorb this fact given the economy and social strife that is raking Greece at the moment. But there is another pig country that ranks this high. Spain comes up 9th, ahead of Iceland, the second only Scandinavian country, to Finland in this aspect of measurement. Another source of information completing this report is the Human Development Index, the HDI of the United Nations Development Program. Quoting Confucius, the report says, in a country well governed, poverty is something to be ashamed of. In a country badly governed, wealth is something to be ashamed of. This quotation provides the synthesis of these 2 reports. In the HDI, the Scandinavian countries are doing very well, and the only feature letting them down is that their gross national income per capita is moderate, except Norway, probably spared by oil incomes. The Republic of Korea, featuring a second on the IDI, also has a modest GNI per capita. Taken as a group, the Scandinavian countries have displayed a long history of strong values of social democracy and human solidarity with sustained underlying statistics, technology, and accountability-based systems of power. Their common thread with Korea is one of a developmental state, and Korea's variant arises out of a bitter struggle of just over half a century ago. The solidarity of Korea and its pride of defeating adversity in just half a century and advancing the notion of development partnership remains the most recent beacon of hope that an information society is possible, as witnessed in the long-established tradition by Scandinavian countries. It is possible that the tetralem of statistics, communication, technology, and power can be tamed, and an information society where the need to and the ability of knowing remain an unmitigated default position, delivering statistics through communication technology and power-shared leadership. The tetralem of statistics, communication technology, and power can and should be solved. A society where human solidarity and sustained development in statistical-based communications technology-driven and power-sharing-led is within our reach. It is a society where Asukis should have been rewarded for building a magnificent Svetzikoveli Basilica in Kreta instead of his hand being chopped off based on superstition, jealousy, lies, and ignorance. Galileo Galilei would have been a laureate for his scientific discovery of the sun being the center of the universe instead of being guillotined for blasphemy against God. King George and King Mushweshwe would not have to be disturbed in their eternal sleep in the knowledge that they ushered to the world a meritorious society devoid of gender discrimination. Measuring the Information Society Report 2014 provides the crucial jewels of knowledge and understanding of the fundamental principles that give birth and meaning to an information society. It shows where it works, how it works, and why it works. It provides for us an injunction by Confucius that a society well governed should be ashamed of poverty. A society that is badly governed should be ashamed of a wealth. It is for society to read the report and find out so that sustainable livelihoods can be successfully led and the promise of the post-2015 agenda of sustainable development can be delivered. Didi Madloba. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pali, for this very interesting perspective and also provocative, because it brings a more philosophical dimension and historical dimension when we look at data and analysis, and also from a sociology perspective. I would say that you give us a very critical lens to look at those data and see how we can interpret the ranking and the indicators and even the goals that are set for by international organizations. And I was listening to your speech, I was recalling some few authors that argued that technology should be a tool for inclusion, social and digital inclusion, but it maybe exclude groups of people. So I think that what you are saying is very important for us, not only data producers, but also policymakers, to better or critically understand the data that we are producing. So thank you very much. And I wonder if you have, since we had a very provocative and insightful speech, if you have some immediate questions. I would like to listen one or two from the floor. Okay, so we leave it for the end of the 4 presentations. And now we are going to listen from experts that produced those information. And I would like to listen from the first speaker some introduction to the Measure Information Reports, the recent information society trends, emerging measure issues, a general overview of this report. What's it all about? And for that, I would like to start with Ms. Susan Taucher, who is the head of ICT Data and Statistics Division. And in a sequence, since it's a whole report, I would like to ask Susan that invite the following speakers as soon as you finish yours. And in the sequence, we are going to listen Esperanza Magpantai, who is the senior statistician at the ICT Data and Statistics Division at ITU BDT. Then the following speaker will be Mr. Ivan Vallejo, analyst at the ICT Data and Statistics Division at ITU. And to wrap up this more comprehensive understanding of the content of the report, Mrs. Vanessa Gray, who is a senior analyst at ICT Data and Statistics Division at ITU BDT. So, Susan, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alex. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to start this presentation of our latest report. Before that, I would also like to sincerely thank our guest speaker, Mr. Lejola, for his very inspiring keynote speech and for the unique presentation that puts the Measuring Information Society report in a broader societal and historical perspective, which I think is very well placed in the discussions that we are having these days, and especially at the symposium in terms of the information society. So we are now going to the more facts and figures that are presented in the report and some of our main findings. If we could please also get the screens here for the PowerPoints. And what we are going to do is I will start to give you a short introduction to the report, highlight some of the main broader trends, and then we are going to cover the different chapters of the report and present to you some of the main findings of those. By now, I think you all had a chance to actually look at the report. If you still need copies, I think we have some outside, at least the executive summaries are left. So you can also use that, and afterwards we are very happy to have a discussion with you on this. This is the first time we are actually presenting the report in more detail, especially to this audience, and we thought since you are our main data providers, you may want to participate in a discussion on the analysis that is being done with the data that you provide, and have some ideas and suggestions on those. Okay, it's up here. Oh, this way. Yeah. Let me just check if we have. Okay. So this is just the outline of the report. You have probably seen that, which starts with an overview of the latest trends, and then it goes into the ICT Development Index. And this year, actually, we have 2 chapters on that. We have a global overview of the analysis of the ICT Development Index, and then also a regional analysis, since the report is also launched in the different regions at the same time as globally. And so there's a lot of interest in looking at the regional results. Then we have a chapter on the pricing of ICT services and different kinds of analysis that have been done on that. And then we have a special chapter on big data. So we are presenting different parts of the report this morning between myself and the other team members. You can find the report also online for download. And we are finishing the translation of the executive summary, which will be shortly available in all the 6 languages also online. Okay, let me start with a few statistical highlights, but we don't have it coming up now. Very good, excellent. So the podium can also look at the slides. So just to highlight a few main findings of the report, we talked about mobile broadband throughout this symposium, which is driving ICT growth, especially in developing countries. And in the last 5 years, the figures show that penetration has increased from 9 to 32%. So that's a very steep growth. And especially in Africa, which has over 40% growth in the past year, which is very high, of course, starting from lower levels. But still, this is very encouraging result. Nevertheless, there are major differences between the penetration rates in developing and developed countries, with 21% in developing countries compared to 84% penetration in developed countries. And the different technologies are driving the growth of mobile broadband in those regions. In terms of internet access, there are now about 44% of households with internet access at home. And this growth over the past year is also being driven in the developing countries, with 40% growth as against 4% in developed countries. And internet users doubled in 5 years, and nowadays 2/3 live in developing countries. Globally, there are around 40% of the population using the internet, and 45% if we exclude China and India. Now, there is some slowdown in some of the indicators. Mobile cellular penetration is at a 10-year low of 2.6%, where the markets are now reaching saturation with almost 7 billion subscriptions worldwide. But also fixed broadband, which was a little bit surprising in our findings. The growth rates have also dropped to 6% in developing countries, although penetration rates remain relatively low as well, with 6%. In the developed countries, on the other hand, fixed broadband is now reaching mature levels at around 27% penetration. The digital divide is a continuous topic that we are trying to highlight in the report. And especially this year, we have pointed to a number of issues that need attention. Even though we have almost ubiquitous mobile cellular coverage, there are still 450 million people that live in an area where there's no access to mobile services. In the least developed countries, fixed broadband penetration is below 1%. And we have highlighted the rural-urban divides throughout the entire report with respect to almost all of the indicators, mobile broadband coverage, households with internet, enterprises connected to ICTs, schools connected to ICTs. There remain significant differences between rural and urban areas. And 4.3 billion people are not yet using the internet. I think you have heard this figure several times this past 2 days. Another area of interest that we are looking at and monitoring is international internet bandwidth, which indeed climbed very sharply over the past decade. Especially the developing countries' share increased from 9% in 2004 to almost 30% in 2013. But if you look at the lower chart, you can see the purple color, which is dominating the international internet bandwidth, and that is Europe, that accounts for more percent than 50% of the world's total, compared with Africa's share of less than 1%. So these are also very important issues to be addressed. We also provide latest figures on investment and revenue trends in the telecommunication sector in the report. And we found these data go actually back to 2012 because financial data are usually have some lag in terms of the reporting. So total telecommunication revenues have stagnated at around 1.9 trillion US dollars, which corresponds to 2.7% of world GDP. And in developed countries, the sector returned to negative growth, which we have already observed before following the financial crisis. In developing countries, there is, however, an increase of 4% over the past year, or in 2012, sorry. Global investment in telecommunication grew by 4% and are now around 300 billion US dollars. In developing countries, the share almost reached 40%, which is an all-time high value, accounting for 121 billion US dollars. Before finishing, I would like to mention the new ITU strategic goals and targets. We also have included them in chapter 1 of the report. For those of you who attended the ITU Plenipotentiary Conference last month, in fact, earlier this month, I should say, in Busan in Korea, you may be familiar with the Connect 2020 agenda and a new resolution that was passed by member states. And this Connect 2020 agenda defines 4 global ICT goals for ITU and its members. And they come with measurable targets and indicators. And the resolution also calls upon the ITU Telecommunication Development Bureau to report regularly on progress in the Measuring the Information Society report. So I would like to draw your attention to that. It's included in chapter 1, because in the future we will be including progress on those goals in our annual report, and we will of course base it on the data we are getting from you. So the first goal is about growth, enable and foster access to and increased use of telecommunication ICT. The second one is about inclusiveness, to bridge the digital divide and provide broadband for all. The third goal is about sustainability, manage challenges resulting from the telecommunication ICT development. And the fourth is about innovation and partnership, lead, improve, and adapt to the changing ICT environment. And here are all the targets that come with each goal. For your information, they are also included on page 28 of the full report if you would like to check them out. I would just like to highlight, rather than going through each of them, I would just like to highlight that they cover indicators that we collect regularly from through our surveys and questionnaires in terms of households with internet access, internet users, and affordability of ICTs. So the price data will be included in the reporting on these goals for goal 1 and for goal 2. We are also looking at the trends or the situation in developed and least developed countries. There's also a target on gender equality in terms of internet users, and there's a target measuring the coverage of rural population by broadband. So these indicators will be collected by ITU, and we are going to report on those. As you can see, there are also some goals and targets that come with indicators that we are currently not collecting from the statistical point of view, such as cybersecurity, e-waste, or greenhouse gas emissions. These will be topics that we will have to address in the future. Please have a look at those, and maybe you want to discuss also in your own countries the data availability for some of these indicators. And we may want to bring some of them also in our expert groups if we need to define methodologies and indicators for the future measurement of those. So I invite you to take a look at that since there will be coming more on this in the future, measuring the information society reports. With this, I would like to hand over the floor to my colleague Esperanza Macpantay for the results of the ICT Development Index. Thank you.
The highlights of the ICT Development Index, we saw already on Monday some of the information related to the rankings, but this morning I'm going to give you some information related to the different analysis that we did related to the different IDI values that we calculated. So the ICT Development Index is a global benchmarking tool that ranks countries according to the levels of their ICT developments. It includes 11 indicators covering 3 main areas: ICT access, ICT use, and ICT skills. This year's report, or this year's analysis, included 166 economies, comparing data between 2012 and 2013. The analysis that we did on the IDI also look at regional analysis as well as analysis of digital divides. We have also looked at assessment of the relationship between several factors influencing ICT developments, which includes geography and population size. We have also looked at the link between ICT developments as measured by the IDI and some of the MDG indicators that are included in the Millennium Development Goals. So the result of the ICT Development Index, here we can see the top 10 that we have awarded on Monday, led by Denmark and followed by Korea. The rest of the countries are coming from Europe, while we had an additional economy coming from Asia, which is the Hong Kong, China. All of these countries that are included in the top 10 share a common characteristics. Mainly, there are countries with high level of income. They share a common competitive markets, so they have very competitive markets, and they have skilled populations that makes use of ICTs effectively. They have also governments that formulated policies and effectively implemented them, and they have achieved these ICT targets that help them drive their national information economies. However, there are still a number of countries that are not benefiting from the good things that ICTs can bring. And in this analysis, we have grouped countries according to their IDI levels. We group them into 4 categories: high, medium, upper, and low. And this countries that are in low group, which is also called the least connected countries. There are 42 of them. They are home to 2.5 billion people. And these are the countries that have very low levels of ICT access and use. So policies for these countries needs to be made so that the people who are living in these countries can benefit to what ICTs can bring. We have also looked at the dynamic countries. These are the countries that have improved and increased more in comparison to other countries. We have looked at them in terms of their increase in the overall IDI ranking, in the ICT access ranking, and the ICT use ranking. So these countries have improved, and the most dynamic of them is the use sub-index more than the access sub-index. And this dynamic increase was due to an indicator, which is the wireless broadband indicator, and mainly on mobile broadband indicator. So you can see from here, UAE, for example, Fiji, Cape Verde, and Thailand have improved on the overall IDI ranking. While for the use, for example, Thailand and Fiji have made a remarkably very high increases in terms of their use sub-index. We have also looked at regional analysis, and we can see from this chart that Europe, CIS, and the Americas all have IDI values that are above the world average, which is now, for this year's report, is 4.8, the value of the index. However, the IDI values in Asia and the Pacific, Arab states, and Africa still lie below the world average. And in particular, if you can see from this chart, Africa is the lowest, which is almost less than a third of that of Europe. So you can see that there's still a lot of differences between the regions of the world in terms of their ICT developments. We have also looked at the comparison of the global ranking and the regional ranking. So we have shown in this chart the 5 top countries in every region. And if you check the second column coming from Europe, the countries that are on top in that region are also the countries on top in the IDI global ranking. Well, if you go to the right of the table, you can see from Africa, the global ranking, if you compare the differences, they really vary. So we have also looked at the different factors that influence ICT developments in countries. We have looked at and analyzed the size of the population density, the income, which is measured by GNI per capita, as well as the percentage of population living in urban areas. So we made the correlation analysis between these indicators and the IDI values. And since IDI, as earlier mentioned, is highly correlated with the income of the country, we had made an additional analysis to control for the effects of the GNI per capita on the IDI values. So we made a partial correlation analysis, and based on this analysis, we found out that the only indicator that makes a difference in terms of IDI or ICT achievements is the percentage of the population living in urban areas. The indicators and the population size, population density, and geographic size of the country does not have a direct relationship on the level of IDI values. So, for example, if a country has a small or high population size, or small or high or big geographic size, it does not have really a relationship with the size of the IDI value. So the differences between countries really vary, and there's no general link between those indicators and the IDI values that we calculated. So the only one that has made really a strong relationship, a strong correlation, is the percentage of population living in urban areas. The last analysis that we did is to look at the relationship between the different indicators included in the MDGs that are currently monitored and the IDI values. So what we found is that there's a strong relationship between the IDI and several MDG indicators. So out of the 38 MDG indicators where we have sufficient data to compare with IDI values that we calculated, 20 of them showed significant relationship with the IDI. And in particular, what we found is that there's a strong negative correlation between poverty, the reduction of poverty, between health indicators. So for example, there's a negative correlation between IDI values and maternal health and child mortality, for example. So the higher the IDI values, the lower the values on maternal mortality and child mortality. Of course, this is just a starting point. This is not necessarily giving us a picture on the impact of ICTs on these different areas of MDGs, but it gives us a starting point to do further analysis in terms of the possible impact that ICTs could have on the different MDGs that we are currently looking at. So with that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm passing the floor to my colleague to give you information on the ICT prices and the role of competition. Thank you very much.
Good morning. So I will be presenting Chapter 4 of the MIS report, in which we present and analyze ITU data on ICT prices this year, with a special focus on the role of competition in shaping prices. Before I start presenting the results, we would like to highlight that there are different ways of presenting prices in general, and that throughout the MIS report, we use 3 different ways of expressing them. First, in terms of US dollars. Second, in terms of PPP dollars. Third, as a percentage of GNI per capita. In this particular presentation, I will only show the results of prices as a percentage of GNI per capita, because this is the metric that closer relates to affordability. Since this is our focus, I will show just this, but you have the other data also in the report. So starting with fixed broadband prices, we observe that prices continue to decrease, and at the same time, entry-level speeds are increasing. If you look at the chart at the top right-hand side, you will see that the decrease in prices, in fixed broadband prices, is mainly driven by developing countries, and in which we have observed that there has been between 2008 and 2012 a decrease of 20% on average in fixed broadband prices per year. We also note that from 2012 to 2013, the decrease in prices has slowed down, so they only decreased by 4%. As to entry-level fixed broadband speeds, you can see in the chart at the bottom right-hand side, if you look at the red bar, that the most common entry-level fixed broadband speed in 2008 was 256 kilobits per second. Now, at the end of 2013, we moved to 1 megabit per second as the most common speed. Also in there, you can observe, comparing the green and the blue bars, that there exist still differences between entry-level fixed broadband speeds in developed and developing countries, being much higher in developed countries. Despite all these reduction in prices that we observe, still a fixed broadband plan costs more than 5% of GNI per capita in most developing countries. Why we use this 5% of GNI per capita as a reference to consider whether a given plan is affordable or not? That's the target set by the Broadband Commission for Digital Development to be achieved by 2015. So below that threshold, prices are considered more or less affordable, above that threshold not. So where do we stand now in terms of these 5% of GNI per capita? Fixed broadband prices correspond to 26% on average of GNI per capita in the developing world, and this compares to 1.5% in the developed world. So you can see that there's a large difference, and that in the developing world we are still far from reaching that target that's set to be achieved next year. Also, we note that major differences persist across regions in the affordability of fixed broadband plans. If you look at the table that's at the bottom of the slide, you will see that average prices, for example, in Europe, CIS, and Arab states fall below the 5% of GNI per capita threshold, whereas in the Americas, Asia and the Pacific, and particularly Africa, they are well above. Also, if you compare the minimum and the maximum, and also you look at the standard deviation, you will see that large differences exist in the affordability of fixed broadband prices within regions. Advancing to mobile broadband prices, first thing that we highlight in the report is that the number of developing countries offering mobile broadband plans has increased by 20%. So this does not just mean that more countries are launching 3G services, but also that countries are making available more types of mobile broadband plans. For example, some countries started by launching just computer-based, and now they also offer handset-based, or just start by postpaid, then offer prepaid, etc. If you look at the actual prices in terms of GNI, as a percentage of GNI per capita, you will see, looking at the red bar in the chart at the right-hand side, that for all different types of plans, still mobile broadband prices represent more than 5% of GNI per capita. And again, we observe here differences in terms of affordability of mobile broadband between developed and developing countries, being the prices in developing countries 6 times more affordable than in developing countries, at least. Despite what I just said on the still not so affordable mobile broadband prices, entry-level mobile broadband is cheaper than fixed broadband in many countries. That's already the case now. For example, that's particularly the case in Africa. If you look at the chart at the top right-hand side, you will see the comparison of fixed and mobile broadband prices in Africa. The purple bar shows where mobile broadband is cheaper than fixed broadband. And we found that in almost half of the countries in Africa, mobile broadband is more than $10 cheaper than fixed broadband per month. So if you consider the income levels of the region, $10 up and down may actually make the difference between it being affordable or not. At the same time, though, we observe that there are, again, major regional differences in the affordability of mobile broadband prices. If you see the chart at the bottom left-hand side, you will see particularly in the green bar that prices in Africa, despite if you remember that they represent much more for fixed broadband, they still are well above all other regions, representing between 15 and 20% of GNI per capita. This year's MIS report featured a special analysis on the affordability of broadband services in view of income inequalities. This goes a little along the lines of what Mr. Sanu said the first day, try to show the human face behind the figures. We're speaking before about macro figures, GNI per capita, etc. Here what we're looking like is more like at household level, how much for a family would that cost? And within a country, for all families, is it the same, or are there differences? For this analysis, we have used data on household disposable income and expenditure, which comes from household surveys. These data reflect people's economic welfare, so it has the advantage that all the part that's private sector, etc., is left out. So we really have there the income or the expenditure at family level. And also it provides insights into the differences in affordability within countries, because data are disaggregated per deciles, so we can see not just an aggregate value for the country, but also for the differences within. In the 2 charts at the bottom, we are showing how income is distributed in some example countries. If income were equally distributed, you would see a diagonal line. The more the lines slope, the more income inequalities, or the more unequally income is distributed within the country. So for example, in the charts you see that in Sweden income is more equally distributed than in the United States, and in Vietnam household expenditure is more equally distributed than in South Africa. This just to illustrate some examples that income distribution varies depending on the country and within countries. We present in the report an analysis of affordability in view of income distribution for fixed broadband, mobile broadband, and also what I will be presenting here for the sake of time, mobile broadband at individual level. So these charts show that household income inequalities greatly influence the affordability of mobile broadband. I will try to explain a little more these charts. In the two of them, we are presenting prepaid handset-based mobile broadband prices, and then as a percentage of, on the chart the left-hand side, household disposable income, the chart at the right-hand side, household expenditure. These are two different measures of household economic levels. They are used, expenditure is used mostly in developing countries because incomes fluctuate more and are more difficult to collect. Income is usually collected more in the developed countries, but they are both two measures of household economic well-being. So if you look at the bars, the purple bar shows the percentage of the population for which the price of mobile broadband represents less than 5% of equivalized income, equivalized household disposable income. On the right-hand side, the same, but for equivalized household expenditure. So that means that all that part of the population, the purple bar is the part of the population for which mobile broadband is rather affordable. Then as you progress to the other colors, you would have at the other end the green bars, which is the part of the population for which mobile broadband represents more than 20% of equivalized household income or expenditure. So that's the part of the population for which really mobile broadband is unaffordable. So you will see there differences across countries, but if you observe also the bars for a given country, differences within the country. For example, if we take the left-hand side chart and we look at El Salvador, Paraguay, Mexico, Bolivia, Colombia, or Honduras, you will see that for the richest 20% of the population, mobile broadband represents less than 5% of individual income. On the other hand, for the poorest 20% of the population, it represents more than 20% of their individual income. So we see there that actually income distribution matters in terms of affordability. Also in this year's MIS report, we feature a quantitative assessment of the impact of competition and regulation on ICT prices. Now.
ვიბრუნდა მე ვამბობდი რომ ჩვენს კონკურენტუნარიან გარემოში თუ გადავხედავ ჩვენ ამ სქემებს ჩვენ ვხედავთ აღწერილობით სტატისტიკას თქვენ ხედავთ სვეტებში იმ ფასებს რომელიც მობილური ფიჭური მომსახურებისათვის არის გადახდილი მოსახლეობის მიერ ხოლო მეორე ასე ვთქვათ სქემაზე ჩვენ ვხედავთ ყველაზე უფრო დაბალ საბაზრო კონცენტრაციას და როგორც კი
market concentration data is sourced from Informa, but we also use World Bank data on GNI per capita and other indicators we include in the model. And then we've developed this model for mobile cellular and fixed broadband prices. So you have all the details in there, but I just wanted to present some of the most important results. In terms of fixed broadband, we see that competition and regulation could help reduce fixed broadband prices by as much as 10% in developing countries. That is, for example, if the regulatory framework in developing countries converges to that of developed countries, we see that there could be a reduction of up to 10%. At the same time, if market concentration in developing countries decreased, so if there were more competition and competition levels match that of those of developed countries, also prices could be reduced up to 10%. That's the case of fixed broadband. You see there in the charts the effects of the different variables on the actual prices, and you can see that although GNI per capita, which makes sense, countries that are richer, people have more income, so they can spend more on the services. That has an impact, but other factors that are purely attributable to the telecom sector have more of an impact. So just for example, the policy on caps, regulation, or competition. In mobile cellular prices, we observe that what really makes the difference is competition rather than regulation. We observe there also, because prices are lower and competition levels higher, that this difference is less marked, but still there could be more competition in developing countries could lead to a 5% reduction in mobile cellular prices. So that's also an important finding. And just to finalize, we would like to point that this, of course, not a one-size-fits-all approach, but international regulatory best practices, such as the ones adopted by the ITU Global Symposium for Regulators, may serve as guidelines for effective regulatory frameworks that, as we presented here, afterwards have an impact on prices. And with this, I will pass over the floor to my colleague Vanessa Gray that will present on the chapter on big data. Thank you.
Before we will continue, I would like to check, is it everything working properly? As I see that Radisson Hotel didn't like the quantitative assessment and and prices. But is it translation working properly? It's okay? Okay, thank you. Continue.
Thank you very much. So I will be talking a bit about the Chapter 5 of the MIS report on the role of big data for ICT monitoring and for development, and particularly to see how big data can help us overcome the current lack of data for policymakers in general, but in particular for ICT policymakers. And the emergence of big data today reflects advances in technology, which allow us to really capture, store, and process more data from an increasing number of sources. And also another trend that's very important in the emergence of big data is the datafication of our actions and the digitization of human activity in what we often refer to as digital footprints. And these are the digital footprints that we leave behind through a number of actions, for example, in terms of administrative or business sources, for example, when we make credit card transactions, in terms of bank details, health details, and of course the mobile phone. And we also leave many digital footprints when we use the internet, for example, when we do searches on the internet or when we use social media. A little bit about the definition of big data. Big data is often defined in terms of the 5 V's. The first and probably one of the key is the volume. That's the vast amounts of data generated through large-scale datafication and digitization of information. And second important V is the velocity. That's the speed at which data are not only generated but also analyzed.
And we talk about the variety, that's the different types of forms and formats that data come in, which includes also a lot of unstructured data, which needs to be brought into forms that we can then actually use and understand. Also, we talk about the veracity of data, that's the level of accuracy and also the uncertainty of the data itself and the data sources, which is one of the challenges we're facing in the big data debate. And we also talk about the value, that's just the potential of big data to potential of big data for socio and economic development. And there's today a general debate on how big data can complement official statistics and to help us formulate social and economic development policies. And there's consensus that while big data can improve the timeliness and completeness of official statistics, it can complement but not replace official statistics, in particular because official statistics are still needed to develop and to test the models of big data, but also to test correlations and the analysis of big data. And the UN Statistical Commission, but also national statistical offices, as we saw on in some presentations on Monday, are increasingly looking into ways of using big data to complement official statistics. And big data are also very important in the post-2015 development agenda's call for the data revolution. And the potential of big data was also highlighted in the report that was published very recently, A World That Counts, by the
იმ სამყაროში, რომელიც გაეროს საექსპერტო ჯგუფმა შეაფასა მონაცემთა რევოლუციის საკითხებზე, ბატონი პალი ლაჰოლა გახლავთ წევრი. ეს ჭარ მონაცემები შეიძლება დაგვეხმარონ პოლიტიკის გაუმჯობესებაში, ინფორმაცია მოგვაწოდონ. ასევე ეს ჭარ მონაცემები ICT-ის ინდუსტრიიდან იმასაც ვიყენებთ ICT-ის გამოყენებისათვის. რომელსაც გააჩნია
policy making, and that refers largely to data that is produced from telecommunication operators, but also internet companies and content providers such as Google, Facebook, and Twitter. And here's an example of how such big data from the ICT industry is helping to improve policy making. This is an example of how UN Global Pulse mined the entire Twitter database to see what are the most important and the most talked about development topics that people are interested and concerned with. And we see that, for example, in September 2014, an honest and responsive government, closely followed by better job opportunities, was what people tweeted about most. And so this, I think, is just an interesting example, and also this was used to feed into the debate on the post-2015 development agenda, just to see what people are interested in. At the same time, this example also highlights the limitations of some of the big data. For example, when we talk about Twitter, and we do analysis, well, we are only talking about those people that are actually using Twitter. And so it's biased data, and it's certainly not representative of globally representative. And that is why it's also important that really the most important data at the moment, and the one with the highest impact, is the data from mobile operators. And because not only is it real time and low cost, but it is also the data that is at least currently the most representative. For example, also if we talk about internet users, we heard from Susan's presentation that still today only 40% of the world's population is using the internet. So obviously, any data we extract from the internet is going to refer only to those people that are actually using the internet and that are online. So for mobile, this is not the case. For mobile, we have more people online and more people using mobile services and more people covered. And also, there's a lot of information that mobile operators hold. For example, what do people use their mobile phone for? Is it for voice? Is it for data? Do they access the internet? And where do they use these services? So there's a lot of information available here. And one example is here a project that was done in Côte d'Ivoire, where communication patterns, but also airtime credit purchase records were used to identify income levels in the country. And we see here the areas in blue are considered lower or poorer areas, and in red areas that are higher income. And just based on the communication patterns and the airtime credits. And what's interesting is these data normally would have been produced through survey data, either through household surveys or the census, but compared to these survey data, well, these mobile operator data are real time, they're low cost, and they can be produced at really any time and any point in time. And so it's also, that's really an advantage compared to the survey data. Also on Monday, we already heard a presentation by Telefonica that showed us how mobile data can be used to identify mobility patterns, to see where people are, and that is even when people are not using their mobile phone, operators can tell where they are located. And this map shows how mobile data were used in Haiti following the 2010 earthquake to see where how people were displaced 3 weeks after the earthquake from the capital, Port-au-Prince, to other areas. So this is really a very concrete example. Now, if big data can be used to provide us with more information and better policies, to help us develop better policies for development, well, what we're really interested in to know as the statistics people and statistics division is how can big data, how can we use big data to help us give us a better picture of the information society, to see who's part of the information society and who's using ICTs, to analyze the digital divide and to understand uptake and access and usage patterns. And so we in this report, in the chapter 5, we really look at some of the possibilities. We're still really very much at the beginning of this, but we've started to see what kind of information can we produce. And what we found is that, for example, apart from the mobility profiles that we talked about, there's also a lot of information on intensity and the quality of use that could be produced through these big data from the ICT industry. For example, operators know when users are using 2G or 3G or LTE advanced networks, and so that can provide us very valuable information. Also, when we talk about mobile broadband services, we can see what kinds of applications and services people are using through the mobile phone. So that's very interesting, and also combined with individual subscriber information, for example, on age, income levels, gender, and location, we can get really much more insights on who's using ICTs and for what kind of purposes. So including, for example, on rural and urban differences. So this is something that this chapter looks into and that we hope to develop further in the near future. The report also looks at a number of challenges, and I think we've heard quite a bit this week. Key challenges include security and privacy, this digital footprints that we leave behind. How can we make sure that people's privacy is protected while at the same time sharing and using and benefiting from the data? Standardization, continuity, and data curation are also other challenges that we need to look into. And the report also makes a number of recommendations on how we can maximize the use of big data or the potential of big data. And one of the things is we need cooperation among international stakeholders, that is UN agencies, but also, of course, ICT industry associations, and very important, the producers of ICT statistics. And to do this, we will need public-private partnerships, and this is where big data really is a bit different, because it's we rely a lot on the data produced by the private sector. So we have to see how international players each can contribute their own expertise and how these resources can be pooled to maximize the benefits. Also, what we see and what we highlight in the report is that there have really been a lot of interesting research collaborations and some promising proof of concept studies, very interesting, but there's no significant programs that have been brought to a replicable scale at the international level or a regional level. And so every time these projects, they need to negotiate with the operators, privacy issues, and so on. So that is something that we really need to look into. And finally, I think what's really important, and one of the main conclusions also of the chapter, is that we need to increase the awareness of the potential and the benefits of big data, and which also was highlighted in Mr. Bahola's keynote speech, is that big data as a public good, to share this, because if we keep it for us, it's not going to have the effects and the benefits, and that this is really an opportunity that we cannot afford not to take advantage of. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, and I also would like to thank Susan, Esperanza, Eva, and Vanessa for these very comprehensive presentations. I would have a lot to say about it, but I would like to give you the floor, and I think that most of you will agree with me that this content, the richness of these reports relies on the in-depth analysis. It's not only a descriptive analysis, but we have a very sophisticated type of multivariate data analysis, correlation analysis. So this brings really input to us as a country to think about our goals and to see where we are and where we are going to. So, but I will give the floor to the participants for questions, comments. So I open the floor, if you have any question. Saudi Arabia, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alexander. My point here is very quick to Mr. Ian. When you mentioned the issue of the affordability for having the ICT services, measuring it by the GNI as a percentage. As you know, that most of the developing countries, the GNI or the GDP itself, it's not well organized and it's not well registered. So most of the activities in the economy, it's underground, or we can say it's a shadow economy. So GNI, I think it's not a proper way to measure the real affordability in these countries. Having said that, I think in some developing countries, if you measure the shadow economy, you will see sometimes that these activities, which is not officially registered in official numbers, it's outweighed the real numbers from the GDP or GNI. Thank you.
I would take some more questions. We have Lau.
Yeah. Further on, I would like to say thank you to Georgia Schoolman and ITU to give me the here. Look, my question is probably like quite simple and very short. I would lay to the IDI portion that I want you guys to clarify more about the ICT development on the like a small country, for example, that need to clarify on the how does the small country, and then for example like some small country they have like quite good on the data quality for data accuracy, for example, but how does country not jump up to be like high rank, for example, and I'm not sure if you understand my question. For example, like some islands, the coverage of the ICT development is quite high. Population is coverage by ICT network, for example, and their income is quite high. But by report on ICT in here, I didn't see their country would jump up into the high ranks, for example. That one would be answer my suspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lau.
Any other questions before we pass to the panelists? Alison, please. Ria.
Thank you very much. Just fabulous information and almost too much to comment on. But I wondered if Mr. Lehochler could comment on some of the factors that were not mentioned around the most successful countries and how we might address those so that Africa perhaps does not remain at the bottom of the information poverty pile. I mean, I think we've identified obvious outcomes like higher GDP per capita, high GDP per se, all these factors, but what is really underlying those high human development indicators? And I think if you look at those 10 states, you're looking at, the underlying common factor is that they're capable states. Most of them are also democratic, or at least, have a untainted human rights record, etc. So there is a political dimension, but practically, there's an institutional base in order to deliver on those. And, is that not where we need to be focusing our attention in order to not just simply perpetuate this, where we're getting more and more information, but we're actually getting a statistical digital divide while we, collecting this data. And then I just thought it would be, if I could get a little bit of information, I'm sure it is in the report, and I have looked at that section, but your measurements of mobile and fixed comparisons, obviously for Africa, the measurement between fixed, which you focus on, could improve by 10% if it was more competitive and regulated. I mean, you're kind of comparing nothing with mobile. There's such limited fixed penetration that one sort of wonders the utility in that. And then if you could talk a little bit about how you measure your mobile broadband. As I mentioned before, the quality measures are very, very difficult to assess unless you sort of set a benchmark for all, so that you're actually comparing apples and oranges in terms of speed that you're measuring. So the speed and price issues. Just to add that I think what we've also found with our quality of service studies that in fact mobile broadband is not only a lot cheaper than fixed, which one might anticipate, but it's actually through a number of countries actually has higher quality. So they have the same latency problems, but the historical concerns around wireless quality are actually not there, that wireless quality is more effective, better than ADSL, which is all that's really available.
Thank you very much, Alison. We have here three topics on affordability. From now, if I well understood, it's about the IDI, how countries can jump in the ranking. And lastly, about mobile and fixed broadband comparisons. Maybe the first one, Ivan, if you could address this affordability issue raised by Saudi Arabia, please.
Thank you, Alexandra. So first, maybe on the last question from Alison. So comparing an fixed and mobile broadband, it's true that it's not the same in terms of both services quality. It's not the same. They mean different things. If you notice, for fixed broadband, we actually do present and compare advertised fixed broadband speeds. We do not do that in mobile broadband because we acknowledge that that's much more difficult to measure in terms of mobile broadband, so that we are not comparing. The comparison we were making here was about the price. So just in case, the idea was to say, well, if both things are available, because we are looking at prices in the main cities, how expensive is one thing and the other, and especially in those cases where fixed broadband is so much expensive, whether mobile broadband could be an alternative. On the question from Saudi Arabia on whether GNI or GDP per capita represent well the economic levels of countries and fact of the shadow economy, I mean, of course that has an impact, but we are producing the ICT price basket for more than 150 countries. So we need to have a statistic that we can compute for all these countries and that is comparable and that is updated more or less in a regular basis. We tried to a different approach with the data that we showed on household disposable income and household expenditure, which this comes from household service, so in there you would not have that problem. But if you notice, we are not showing for all countries, just from selected countries, because unfortunately we do not have data for all countries to present a global ranking. So we are trying these sort of one-off efforts, but indeed, if more data were available, we could produce a more precise measurement.
Thank you, Ivan. Would like to address?
Yes, I think Alison was asking the question. That relates really to the political economy of systems and how does change impact on those kinds of political economies and what drives the change. In particular, in the area of data and information technology. Perhaps 2 points to make. One that doesn't address political economy, but one that suggests that for the first time we have a product that does not necessarily know scarcity, but actually becomes more useful and usable and accessible the more its use is made. So it's an inexhaustible resource. When you have data on this report, you don't deny me access to that data. We can all have it. So it's a very fundamental property that underlies information and communications technology. It's an important property that while our economic theory is anchored on scarcity and price increases because of demand, this particular one runs in the face of that fundamental theory that we have ever known. Yet, we have not taken into account that that by itself should be a prime driver of change in the body polity of our political economy and systems. The second is what evidence do we have that makes these countries very unique that we see? I think one of the things that I do raise in my rendition is that there has been long history of political and human solidarity, particularly from the Scandinavian countries, those of us from the continent who have been victims of colonialism, particularly the Southern Africa region, know the solidarity that came from those Scandinavian countries in advancing liberation. So the ethos of human solidarity as exists in those countries has been very, very exemplary. Korea, when you go to South Korea, all the time in the decade that I've gone there, a decade ago, they will say 50 years ago, we came out of a very sad history. Today we are different. And going forward, this is our path. And this is how we express our solidarity and social compact with other societies. The financial crisis of 2008 didn't hit Korea that much because they actually took a decision as to how they will tackle this, and that was based on the solidarity that exists in themselves. And of course, finally, they define themselves as a developmental state. They are capable states. So these issues of how society participates in democratic formations is very, very, very crucial. The report cannot be read in isolation of the Human Development Index report. and many other reports. On the continent of Africa, of course, we don't have a very good record of democracy except Botswana, which has not experienced any coup. Probably that's the only country in Africa. But we have seen an emergence of democratic notions and principles, and the African peer review mechanism, which has been not appreciated that much by many, has been the prime mover of democratization. And what we saw in Burkina Faso, which was a popular uprising, is a consequence of this thirst for democracy. And I think those changes, as they occur, will be very fundamental to the change going forward. So the rule of law, development, and so on, do define and coincide very well with information technology, because it's in its popular use, in its application, in its absence of scarcity, that it cannot be monopolized by a small aristocracy. It has to be popularized and democratized. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Susan?
As far as I understood the question from Lau, it was about how small countries can make progress on the index, if this is what you were addressing, or leapfrogging. Now, we could talk probably the whole day about this. I have 1 minute. So it's a very complex issue because it relates to different policies, ICT policies, economic, social policies that are in place in the country that help countries to also advance on the information society. What we have seen from our analysis in this report is that as has been presented by Esperanza, that the actual size of the country, the population size, does not play a role, or the size itself. There is a close correlation with GDP per capita, also, again, pointing to the question from Saudi Arabia. We do have that. And if we look at the top performers, that has also been pointed out by Mr. Lejola, it is not necessarily also those that have the highest GDP per capita. We have heard a lot about the case of Korea, for example, which is advancing very highly on ICT developments, of what you would expect given the level of GDP per capita of the country. So there are issues that could be done in terms of the right implementation of the ICT policies and the national ICT strategies and plans. Many countries have actually put in place now, almost all of them, a national ICT policy and strategy. But the effective and efficient implementation of these policies is also very important to ensure that infrastructure is provided, that the market is regulated in a way that is developing the infrastructure and services properly in the country, that prices are becoming more affordable, and also that rural and remote areas are being connected. So all of this is part of a way to improve the ICT access and uptake in countries, and therefore also leads to progress on ICT development. But as I said, we could talk about this much more in another occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I have asked the permission of Mr. Chair to form additional minutes due to the interruptions, and I have 3 more requests from the floor: Iran, Moldova, and Indonesia, and Japan, but please be very brief and direct. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for producing this rich report. I have 2 or 3 questions. Is there any plan to consider also the indicators, or at least encourage the countries to report the indicators regarding the impact, stage 3 of the framework, such as growth or ICT outcome indicators? And also, is there any plan to work on the ICT skills part, because we think that it should be revised? And also, we want to suggest to extend the analysis in the IPB part two, and to consider also the investment, the effect of the behavior of regulation on the investment and also the prices. I think because you had a separate section on the investment before, but it is a good idea also to consider the investment, foreign direct investment, and also investment of the operators and the effect of regulation on the investment and prices in your report. And also you had a section on the digital native. Do you want to continue that, or has been stopped? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Iran. Moldova, please have the floor.
Roman Bakhnaro, National Regulatory Agency. I have little questions, maybe proposal to include in report. If we speak about ICT price, to include the list with price ranking not related only to global to income, but also ranking by price for end user. Because I know in a report in 2011, I saw this ranking. Why it is important to include this list ranking in report? Because our mass media, and I think and our country also, in this ranking list, we are at 60 position. But if we speak about end user's price, we are for fixed telephony or maybe for our services in top 10 or maybe top 3 ranking. And this list, okay, it is not. It is important for mass media, for journalists, maybe for parliament, government in our country, and in our country, because show end users price, not price related to income. And we know this relation with PPP or income. It is an economical index, we know, but not end user price, because end users relate price between country. Okay, I have a friend in, I don't know, in Germany or other country, and we speak about end user price, not economical ranking. And it is important to include this list. Not, okay, methodology, it is very difficult to change, because this is economical part. But for end users, it is important to include, maybe for next edition, this list as a part, I don't know, annex 6 or other annex. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Moldova. Indonesia, if you can please be very brief, I appreciate.
Thank you. Just a quick question, because some of them have been brought by other colleagues. First of all, maybe I'd like to ask about, I heard before that some country, because of the changing of methodology, can improve. It's not kidding, or I think it's just kidding, but I think some maybe influence other country too about the changing of methodology. Maybe we can limit not every year changing the methodology, or just asking more question, you know. Also, for the in-depth analysis, I like to maybe you can add the typical country here. You said before that size and also population is not matter, but can you classify the country between the landlocked or archipelago island and something like that? Thank you.
Thank you. Japan, please, and then we finish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the floor. And firstly, we congratulate ITU on completing the MIS report. And as you know, ICT environment has rapidly changed and evolved. The new technologies and services have been emerged. Therefore, we think that there is a great need to reflect that trend to IDI or MIS. And our question is, we would like to know how ITU will include those new trend or technologies to MIS. Thank you. Big data would be one good example.
Thank you very much. May I ask Susan to make general comments on these 4 questions, please?
Okay, thank you very much, and I really appreciate the questions and the interest in the report. I would like to just briefly address them. First by Iran on the impact measurement. This is something that we have been discussing for a long time in the partnership. We need to further define what impact measurement could be. The way the index is currently defined is not about measuring impact, but it's measuring about progress, status, and development on ICT. So the impact is something that in the conceptual framework that comes out of this process, and we have designed the index in a way that we have included the skills component because that's important for effectively actually using ICTs, which then also improves impact. So there's a lot of discussion about impact, and we have those also in the partnership. ICT skills, as you know, because you're part of the expert group, we are discussing that in the ACTI, and we will continue to discuss that jointly with our colleagues from the UNESCO Institute for Statistics. We are working on improving the ICT skills part, and that is something that will be taken up in the expert group. On the investment effect of regulation, that is an interesting perspective. We will also look into that. We have used actually data from our colleagues in ITU who work on regulatory policies to do this analysis, and we can also look into this aspect. On the digital natives, this was sort of a one-off measurement we did last year. It has raised a lot of interest, so perhaps we will come back to this calculation in the future again and see how progress has been done on that. Then for Moldova, the price rankings not in different values. We do publish all of the values in the report, although not in a ranked order, which is correct. And as my colleague Ivan explained, because we are looking primarily into affordability, but we can certainly also look into having tables with other presenting the data in a different way annexed. On the Indonesia, about the methodology, in fact, the methodology of the index has not changed much over the past years. So any changes in the methodology are actually also discussed in terms of with our expert group. So there haven't been a lot of changes in the methodology. The situation of landlocked countries, as we presented, there were a number of correlations we looked at in terms of different variables where we didn't find any particular correlation. We can also do that for the landlocked countries and see what the result for that would be. And then finally, from Japan, you were referring to the report and not to the index, I understand, right? Okay. So, yeah, we are trying to feature, of course, new developments and trends in the report every year. Like we did with big data, we also look at the new technologies that come up, and this is certainly on top of our priority for the Measuring Information Society report. We are, of course, always happy for suggestions of topics that are of special interest from the member states. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you all the participants for your questions. I'm sorry that we don't have more time to discussions, and I will skip my closing remarks, but I have to tell you that when I was reading the report last Monday, I thought that chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4 bring us very important global trends and very in-depth analysis based on the data that we have as member states provided to ITU. So we are looking at the past to understand the future. But this time, this report on chapter 5 especially brings important elements for us, make our brains to work to understand how, as data producers, we are going to use all this big data thing to complement other statistics. So we should go home and start to working with our brains to understand this challenge. And I also think that another very important issue this time is to think about global ICT goals based on the 2020 ITU strategic goals, namely growth, inclusiveness, sustainability, and innovation. So I think that we have a lot of inputs and insights to think forward. And this time, this report gives us much work to do in terms of thinking about the future. So with that, I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Chair to close the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting session. Thank you to panelists. Thank you to moderator. We have now a coffee break for half an hour, and we will continue our next session. Next session will be this high-level panel debate on the ICT Development Index. And please return to the room in half an hour at 11:20. Thank you very much.